We are back. Giants baseball, past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. The man of the hour, the host, Michael Duca. How are you, sir?
Couldn't be better, Ralph. Thank you for asking. How about yourself?
Oh, no complaints whatsoever. We were just talking a little off air about moderate weather. I live in Alameda, California. You lived in Alameda, California. And the difference between Alameda and going through the tunnel to Contra Costa could be, 15 degrees, 20 degrees sometimes?
The other day, I think it was yesterday, they were showing the difference between Pacifica and Walnut Creek, and it was 43 degrees.
Wow.
It was really pretty amazing.
We're talking 27 miles, if that.
Yeah, if that.
If that. And to say nothing of being able to go up to the Lake Tahoe or Reno, an hour and a half, 2 hours away, and ski. And this no change in climate, ladies and gentlemen. But this year there's snow all through all through the summer. There's been snow up in the lake, but and the flood, no change of climate whatsoever. I don't see any. Maybe it's me.
Oh heavens, no.
No, right. You'll have to convince me. All that scientific book work, forget that. People floating around.
Well, unfortunately, Ralph, the bad news is that all of the necessary research and evidence was being stored at ground level in downtown Houston.
Right. Very good. Very good. I wrote a little thing where I'm surprised. I'd be surprised if Texans didn't brag about their gigantic houseboats. Folks that really had no belief in what wasn't thinking in terms of either climate change or FEMA, supporting FEMA. They were against that for.
Having spent some time in Texas, I spent the better part of a year working around the state, and then since then I visited both Houston and Dallas area as well as College Station. I can tell you that in the two really big cities, and probably in the three really big cities, San Antonio impressed me this way, and Houston and Dallas do not necessarily share the same political mentality as the other 253,000 counties in Texas. First of all, there's some incredibly nice people in that state. It breaks my heart to see what's happening in some of those areas. I mean, on the one hand, you have to look at people and say, well, you did choose to live in a floodplain on a city built on a 200 square mile swamp that's 7 feet above sea level and 50 miles inland. On the other hand, you also have to say people go where the opportunities are, and they've tried to build a life, and when your entire life gets destroyed and washed away in a matter of a day or two, it's a devastating moment. And regardless of the political leanings of that state or how you feel about the way they may treat issues like immigrants' rights and women's rights, there's a fundamental humanity at the base of all of this. And if we fail to recognize that, and if we fail to act appropriately on that, then we're no better than those people that we scorn.
Yeah. And they're getting help. Different countries are coming in. Israel is coming in, for instance.
Canada has offered whatever they can. Mexico has too, although our president has not seen fit to allow them to throw that help over the wall yet.
And yeah, it's sad. It's is what it is, but there's so much going on in this world that we bemoan. We just wake up every day going, what's going to happen next? I had a mental health expert on, haven't run the show yet, and asked him, quite frankly, is someone who is obviously hurting mentally, can they be rehabilitated? In other words, there's doctors available to him, and the government, I'm sure they must come to him at times. It's a lot of pressure. Well, he told me quite frankly that the symptoms that Trump shows as a narcissist, people don't accept help that are in that position. They rarely rehabilitate. And
well, yeah, if your worldview is that yeah, exactly. If your worldview is that the world revolves around you, if your worldview is that you are the center of all activity, then it's very difficult for you on a rational level, let alone on an irrational one, to accept the notion that there's anything wrong.
Right. Everything you've done, you've succeeded. You're the president. You're the guy.
It's literally the old joke, Ralph. First, the light bulb has to want to change.
Right. Right. You have to accept it. And unfortunately, that doesn't come until after the crash with most people, especially narcissists.
Well, it rarely comes because narcissism is rarely as indulged as our nation has indulged it in this instance. Narcissists rarely have the opportunity to be dangerous to anyone, let alone themselves. And this is a confluence of many unusual circumstances coming together here. Narcissists don't generally run for office. They don't generally succeed when they do. They don't generally have access to the levers of power. We're sailing uncharted waters through Buffalo Bayou right now.
Yeah. Well, let's go to our escape. How about that? Our escape is our memories. And you and I share a passion and a love for baseball that we can at least go back a little bit. And I suggested last week that we talk about Willie McCovey. And where do you start with Willie? Let's start with a line drive in the 1962 World Series to Bobby Richardson at second base for the Yankees. I'm going to ask you, was that line drive hit as hard as legend brings to mind?
Well,
whatever I said.
First of all, there is a whole backstory to my experience with that particular line drive, but I'm going to answer your question first, and that is the quality of network television and of television receivers in 1962 was such that that's a hard question to answer in real time. And if you notice, if you ever watch like the old highlight films that Major League Baseball used to put out of the World Series, which were rainy day favorites when your PE class couldn't go outside because it was pouring down rain, the coach would always have a movie, and it was usually something like the World Series highlights. That play is always shown in slow motion. Always. So it's very difficult to get a bead on how hard the ball was hit. What we know is that in memory, Bobby Richardson grew to be 11 feet tall and leaped as high as he could to catch the ball. And in reality, he took one step to his right. The ball was hit almost directly at him, and it was hit, if memory serves, it was hit about head high. So, it was one of those things where those of us who were there, at least spiritually, we may agonize over that ball having been a foot to the left, a foot to the right, or a foot higher. But the real killer in that situation was the fact that the tying run should have scored on the previous play. Willie Mays hit a ball down the line in right field, and because it had been raining, not like it has in Houston, but it had been raining a whole lot for the Bay Area in October. The ground was absolutely saturated, and a ball that was hit hard enough to get past Roger Maris and make it all the way to the wall didn't. It stuck in the mud. Maris was able to cut it off, pick it up. He was a very vastly underrated outfielder with a very strong arm, and he made a very strong throw. And Matty Lou would have been out at the plate most likely had he challenged that throw, but it was a confluence of weather-related events that got us to that point.
And Whitey Lockman, who is one of my boyhood heroes, as were all the coaches and the manager on that 62 team, Jansen and Westrom, all those guys, Lockman holds up Matty Lou at third, and Willie was known to have said, if it was me, I'd have taken the plate. So,
Willie,
but it was Maris
was
did
not
great arm.
He did, and the one thing that you have, the one reason that you might want to challenge that arm is the same reason that he was able to get to the ball. It was mucky out there. He might not have been able to plant and make a strong throw. He might have tried to make too strong a throw and slipped.
And the ball may have been wet.
And if any of those things happens, then not only does Matty score, but Mays probably challenges that play to win the World Series.
Right.
However, Willie wasn't Matty. Matty Lou was a fine player, a very good hitter, not the best base runner in the world, despite his speed. Willie had instincts, and now we're talking about Willie Mays, had instincts that the rest of us cannot even imagine having. In our smartest day of baseball knowledge, we probably don't have the baseball IQ that Willie Mays had coming out of the womb. He's one of those people that's got a savant feel for the game.
Right. There was you mentioned Matty was not Willie. There was a little ditty written in L.A. about the Davises. The differences in Davises can be seen in many ways. Willie is not Tommy, and Tommy is not Mays. That's they paraphrased it up in San Francisco. No, he was Willie Davis and Tommy Davis combined were not Willie Mays in so many different ways on the base pass, positioning other players. But before I forget, let me prod you, if I might, into giving me the McCovey backstory that you promised.
Well, as people may or may not remember, that year came about because in late September, guy, I want to say his name was Hal Oliver, maybe, for the St. Louis Cardinals. Back up. A
catcher, Gene Oliver.
Gene Oliver, thank you. Gene Oliver hit a home run on the last Sunday of the season, and the Giants were able to tie the Dodgers on the last day. I was just starting junior high school in those days. We didn't have middle school. We had junior high school. We had enough, our egos were healthy enough that we could accept being the junior variety. And The guy across the street from me was the biggest Giants fan I knew, and we literally, when that game ended, we met in the middle of the street running towards each other. We were so excited that the Giants had made it into a playoff. And then, those were the days where you could maybe possibly sneak a transistor radio in your school supplies and listen during recess or such. We kind of went through games there. And so starting junior high school in homeroom in 7th grade, the first thing we did, we were seated in alphabetical order. And the first thing we were supposed to do, since we were from different elementary schools, is that we were told to stand up, introduce ourselves, and answer say, wouldn't it be great if, fill in the blank, to show something about ourselves. And the guy sitting directly in front of me, who I'd never met before, his name was Paul Cluster, and he stood up and he said exactly what I was going to say. He stole my line. It was not the first time it happened to me in my life, and I'm sure it won't be the last. But he stood up and said, wouldn't it be great if the Giants caught the Dodgers this year and went to the World Series? Well, thus began that improbable series of events that culminated with the 4-run ninth inning in Game 3 and Jim Davenport bringing in the go-ahead run and the Giants winning the playoff. And then they went into the World Series, and there was such an extended delay in the middle of that World Series, I actually wound up moving, believe it or not. My family moved to San Diego during the break in the World Series. So I left the area of my youth, and I left the area full of Giants fans, and we moved to San Diego, and we were living in a motel for the first week. I watched that play on probably a 15-year-old black and white television.
Right.
There
so
might
did
have been
I.
there might have been 3 Bobby Richardsons who caught that ball, for all I remember. And I was,
and he caught it with 2 hands. You had the wherewithal, Richardson, to really grasp that ball. I remember that. If only. Ifs and buts. If ifs and buts were candy and nuts,
we'd all be diabetic.
It would be. I'll tell you a giant story from autumn that comes to mind right off the top of my head. I'm a little kid. The season is over. I'm with my grandparents. We're in the Bronx. We're walking down the Grand Concourse, and I'm missing the season. As a little kid, I'm missing the season. And we walk into Alexander's, the big department store, and it is crepe paper, black and orange for Halloween. But my first hit was something about the Giants. They're selling caps, they're selling whatever it was. I was so disappointed that it was Halloween that it wasn't the Giants. And that's way back, the New York Giants sports fans. So I have those great memories. Also, again,
that brings back the Charlie Dressenline. Remember, Halloween is the American version of the Day of the Dead. All Souls Day is November 1st, and it's actually a national holiday in most of Europe. Halloween is the night before, and wasn't it Charlie Dressen who said in 1951 the Giants is dead? When they were 13 games behind?
Yes, it probably was, because Leo DeRocher had already been a Giant. And, yes, Leo's line was nice guys finish last, which was directed at Harry, if I'm not mistaken. But, the Giants is dead. And they came back, telescope in hand. Did you read that book?
They certainly did. Which one? The one where
Green Cathedrals. Green Cathedrals.
I'm going to say yes. I own it. I own about 200 baseball books, and I've read many of them, and I've certainly looked through all of them.
Right.
I do know this. I do know that in the iconic shot of Willie Mays making the catch in front of Arnold Hano,
right,
54 World Series.
I interviewed.
If you carefully look at the color photograph, which is shot on finer grained film than the black and white was, if you look at the color photograph and blow it up, you will see that in those windows above the center field cutout, there is a person leaning out of the window. And that's allegedly the same spot that Sal Ivars stood in and stole signs, allegedly. And the person in that window makes that one of the more interesting photographs of all time, because the person in that window was the late, great Joe Garagiola.
Right, who was acquired by the Giants after September 1st, was not eligible, had a very good September, really helped them quite a bit. They had Westerman Cott, and they were both weak-hitting catches. And Garagiola helped them, was not eligible for the World Series, sat in that window. Let me, if I might, correct you a little bit. In the day back in 1951, when the Giants were allegedly stealing signs with the telescope provided by a guy named Schmentz, who I had never heard of before, but a Giant for a very short period of time. Herman Franks was the guy relaying the signs to Sal Ivars, but Ivars was down in the bullpen at that time.
Okay.
He was a spare catcher and down in, like I say, and he got the signs with a buzzer, and he passed the signs on with this loud buzzer where the book pretty much concludes that Thompson knew it was going to be a fastball. You still have to hit the fastball.
You have to see it. You have to hit it. It has to be in a location that you can hit it. And, oh, by the way, the thing that, to me, puts a pin in all of these allegations is if you go look at that stretch run where they made up the 13 games, their record was better on the road, and they hit about 60 points higher on the road than they did at home. So whatever the cheating was, if it existed, it worked in reverse.
Wow. Very, very interesting on that one. I never did put two and two together on that.
Yeah. Now, here's the interesting thing. You know, we're going to go off on a tangent now. We're going to talk a little bit about cheating.
Okay.
You get guys who have what I would call situational ethics. I'm blanking right now. I'm trying to remember the name of the great Cleveland Indians pitcher who went away for World War II, came back, 20-game, Bob Feller. Yes, Bob Feller, the only guy to pitch a no-hitter on opening day.
Right.
Bob Feller came back from the war with a military-grade spy telescope, and it was installed in the scoreboard at Cleveland Municipal Stadium. They used it for 2 years. There was a stray light that would occasionally flicker, and nobody could figure out where the problem was in the scoreboard. It wasn't a problem. It was a signal that a breaking ball was coming. And they used this for 2 years, and yet somehow despite doing that, Bob Feller is possibly the single most adamant member of the Hall of Fame about keeping out people who used steroids.
Ooh. Wow. That,
so, you know...
Well, he could have made the case that it wasn't cheating at that time, and steroid users could make the case that it was, McGuire, his supplements, were legal at that time as well. So,
they can. I always make the case that it's a game of competition and both sides were using. Therefore, I don't see how the playing field wasn't level unless you were one of those people who wasn't using anything at all.
Well, that all is true. But what really galls me is like with the same thing that galls me in life with politicians, with businessmen. They can't say, all right, I did it. I made a mistake. I was wrong. Giambi said that, and he was well accepted. The overwhelming majority of humans do not have that trait to be able to say, I made a mistake. I was wrong. Their ego, whatever it is, and that worked in the Nixon thing. Oh, no, not me. No, never. Nah. You'd have to prove it. You'd have to have a tape of that for me to believe it. That kind of thing. And I think that's what's, and Pete Rose is a good example of that. Yeah. So.
I've often said, Ralph, that our real national pastime is exaggeratedly building people up so that we can see how much more fun it is when we knock the pedestal out from under them.
Right. And, there are people that get enjoyment out of Aaron Judge not doing well in the second half that for much the same reason. They get
I don't get any enjoyment out of him not doing well, but I do remember pointing out to people it's his first time through the league. Let's see what happens when adjustments are made. In fact, I think that my most common response to Aaron Judge in the first half of this year would really irritate a lot of people. I would just tell them 2 words: Bob Moss.
Right. Yes, the Yankee first baseman, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he was from Cal.
Out of Stockton, California, or somewhere in the area.
Yeah, he was a Cal graduate, and he came up in his rookie year. He just torched the league. Memory does not serve me well, but I want to say he was somewhere around 31 or 32 home runs as a rookie, and I want to say he finished his career with fewer than 75.
Right. And there were the cases when I was a kid, the Hurricane Hazels, who came on with a great bang and died out. So, yeah, that happens. And it's a mile run, not a 100-yard dash. Has a lot to do with it, and it's a long season. Pitchers make adjustments. Hitters have to make adjustments, and then pitchers will make adjustment again, and back and forth. And some players can change and adapt, and some can't. Some have the same hole in their swing all through their career.
To tie it back, one guy who hit the big leagues with as big a bang as you possibly can turned out to have a pretty good career. He finished his career as the leading left-handed home run hitter of all time.
Wow. And
tied for it with the great Ted Williams, if memory serves.
Well, Ruth was a left-handed hitter too.
Oh, excuse me. You're right.
That was him, but he was up in good company.
I think he was the National League's leading left-handed home run hitter.
Oh, okay. Okay. And that's back in the day when the two leagues had a distinct competition, a difference in style, difference in umpires' gear, with chest protector on the outside, this type of thing. And now, what with interleague play and the like, it's almost the two league thing has become homogenized. Am I right?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. There's no more league presidents. There's no more league offices. The leagues are really more like divisions now. It's more like the American division and the national division.
Right. That's a good way. I may have asked you this before. Do you think designated hitter is coming for the designated hitter is coming for both leagues?
I don't, but that's probably wishful thinking. I would hate it if it did, and most people who have been in both leagues would hate it if it did. If you ask players who've been in both leagues, they'll tell you that the National League game is much more interesting to play. There is much more strategy, and the American League game is basically pitchers can throw inside if they want because they never have to hit, and you just swing and swing and swing. The bunt is not very important. Stolen base is not very important because you don't have to figure out a way to manufacture runs with a lineup that includes a pitcher hitting.
Right. So it's to me that's much more boring of a game. But we're in a day and age. If you ask the average fan, they love that home run. They love the fact that your designated hitter has more of a chance of hitting a home run, obviously, than the pitcher. So, change. That's what it comes down to. Your most memorable McCovey moment as a Giant? Yours.
For me personally?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was 16, and I worked for one day as a vendor at Dodger Stadium. I found out that when you first start out, they give you the worst job you can possibly have, and if you survive it for 7 or 8 years, it might move you up to selling something that people will actually buy. I was selling soft drinks. And that doesn't seem like it's such a bad thing, but in those days you sold soft drinks. You clipped your strap around the two handholds of a 24-bottle case.
Oh, wow.
Walked around.
Not the little paper cups. It was preceded paper cups, in other words.
Well, there were paper cups, but they didn't come pre-filled. You opened the bottle, poured it into the cup, handed the people a cup, and then you got to drag the empty bottle around with you.
Which is almost equally as heavy, yeah.
Yeah, a case weighed about 58 pounds, and an empty case weighed about 33 pounds. And dragging that around on your neck all day when you have zero experience at it, on your feet for 4 or 5 hours on concrete, was not the most fun experience, but I got to be there for batting practice. And it was a pretty momentous night. It was the night that Harry Wendelstedt became the only umpire in the history of the game to invoke the "you didn't try hard enough to get out of the way" rule.
Well, on Drysdale with Dick Dietz, was that the one?
On what I've always called Drysdale's fake record, for that very reason. To say that Dick Dietz didn't try hard enough to get out of the way is to demonstrate that Dietz was the veteran there and Wendelstedt was the rookie, and obviously hadn't seen Dietz play very much because you couldn't tell if Dick Dietz was in a hurry.
Right. He's a plotter.
He was absolutely a plotter. But on that night, in batting practice, you have to envision Dodger Stadium in those days had no real advertising except the Union Oil logo on the two trapezoidal shapes. message boards out in right and left field pavilions. And then in dead center field, there are 2 flagpoles and a 60-foot-high batter's eye right before the parking lot. And I watched Willie McCovey in batting practice split the uprights of those flagpoles and hit 3 consecutive balls over the batter's eye. To my knowledge, nobody has ever done that in a game.
Wow. And to have the skill to just put 3 balls in the same spot. Wow.
Yeah, I saw something like that was pretty hilarious in the 1984 All-Star game at Candlestick. Reggie Jackson and Reggie Smith had a little competition during batting practice, and they each hit a ball down the tunnel in upper reserve 38 at Candlestick, Old Candlestick Park, which was about 2 sections from the foul pole and about 1,000,000 miles from home plate. It was absolutely, Reggie hit one, pointed up there, and watched it disappear into the tunnel, and then I watched him turn to Reggie Smith and say, "Can you do that?" And Smith took a couple of pitches and then launched one that bounced right at the entrance and rolled down that tunnel. So that was an astonishing thing to watch too. The little things that guys do to show off in this game are the things that really show you how much skill they have buried in there. And I don't think anybody showed more skill as a young player, really, than Willie McCovey. We talk about the way guys break into the game. How about breaking into the game against a Hall of Fame pitcher?
Right.
And hitting a pair of triples and a pair of singles and going 4 for 4 against it. How about the ownership that McCovey had over Don Drysdale? I mean, Drysdale basically said, if I had my druthers, I'd just hit him every time. Drysdale was physically afraid of McCovey because McCovey could hit line drives back up the box that were going over 100 miles an hour. And it was consistent. When he was in the league, people don't think about him this way because you just see isolated clips. But he was the single most feared hitter in all of baseball in the late 60s. The only guy that I could think of who might have competed for that appellation was Frank Howard.
Well, Willie Stargell was pretty good hitter too.
He was a very good hitter, but he was not feared like McCovey in the 60s. In the 70s, he was given more of his due as Willie's career wound down.
Right. Do you remember Mike Ivey and his taking over for Willie?
I remember Mike Ivey when he was drafted by the San Diego Padres. I remember that Mike Ivey had the worst case of the yips the catcher can have. He and Mackie Sasser both suffered it with the Giants, where he just could not throw the ball back to the pitcher and eventually wound up no longer being a catcher. He was the number 1 pick in the draft by the Padres and then wound up not being a catcher because he just could not get past the psychological block of throwing the ball back to the mound. He could throw to second base just fine. He could pick you off first, but he couldn't throw the ball back to the pitcher.
Whoa, that is very strange. Hey, we've had a good talk as usual. I'm appreciative of your friendship and your professionalism. How about that?
Well, there's a tough thing to live up to week, but I'm going to do my best.
No, it's easy. Easy for you, tough for a lot of people. Easy for you.
Well, perhaps.
Thank you, Michael Duca.
Flatter me. Thank you, Ralph. It's always a pleasure.
Flatterable. Be well, my friend. We'll do it the same time next week, and we'll keep it going.
All right. Next week, I'll let you know all about New Orleans.
Beautiful. Please, and be safe, for crying out loud.
Oh, I shall. Our hotel is attached to the Superdome, so I may not even have to go outdoors once I get there.
Perfect. See you soon.
All right. Thank you, Ralph. Take care.
All right. Everybody out there, keep on keeping on. We'll be back. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Giants baseball, past, present, future. Adios, everybody.